Hey, folks, let's get started here. It's 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
We'll get started. Call the meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. Mark, you can start off.
Mark LeMay, Board of Selectmen's representative.
Sonny Trunley.
Shay Senate.
Lisa Jukes.
Richard Pleasure.
Joe Spurl.
Diana McCarthy, School Board Rep. Elizabeth Brule.
Brian Lewis. Lee Sperry.
My name is Pete Georgiantis. I'm chairman. Guy said he would be late, if at all. Liz says she wasn't going to be able to be here. And Brian, as we heard last night, has a planning board meeting in Ware, and hopefully it'll get done in time to come over. So tonight we're going to start with the on our school process, and first up is going to be the district. Ray, are you going to present the district, or who's presenting?
Brian's going to give you an introduction, then I'll present the district budget.
The process is going to be, please, when you set up there, state your name. Also, for any of the committee members that ask questions, make sure you lean over to one of the mics, because we don't have as many mics in this room as we do the others. So in order for the TV to catch it, we need to make sure we're all standing or sitting in front of a mic. All right?
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Brian Balke. I'm the interim superintendent in the SAU. I have a handout prepared for each of you, so I'll send this around each direction. My goal this evening is to give the Budget Committee a general overview of the process that was utilized to develop the budget this year, and to give you some general information about the budget. You'll then hear a series of presentations from Mr. Labor, as well as each of the respective principals. So over the next 3 fun-filled nights, those will be the folks that'll present to you. The slides that I presented, hopefully you can read it better than I can. I'll start with just a general calendar. In speaking with Pete, we agreed that we'd begin with an overview of the district, go through all of the district lines. Those are your 000 lines, the default calculation, the revenues, and Mr. McBride and Mrs. McCann are here from Goffstown High School to present the high school's budget to you this evening. Next week, we've got Mountain View, Technology, Facilities, Athletics, and Maple Ave. And then our third night, we'll have the Bartlett presentation, the Glen Lake presentation, and we'll go over what the warrant articles are. The Budget Committee may be interested to know right away that at this point there are 2 potential contracts that will be on the warrant. That certainly influences the work that we're doing and the work that you're doing, and there are no other money articles that will be presented. I don't know if folks have heard, but the elementary facilities project is not going to be on the warrant this year. I'll go ahead and start with, if you're on the second slide at page 2, we're going to start right away with the numbers. The default calculation is $36,135,385. The school board's budget is $36,429,124 for a difference of $293,000. As I briefly stated, other priorities that strongly influence and coincide with the work that the school board did are the 2 contracts. Just to provide a little context for the Budget Committee, this town has not voted on a teacher contract in 8 years. We have had 2 years of unsuccessful negotiations with the Teachers Association following a 5-year contract. So we are negotiating this year and hope to have an agreement that will be ratified by the Teachers Association membership, and will be moving on to the warrant article. That process is ongoing, not completed. Additionally, the Support Staff Association is also negotiating for, this is the second year of them as well, for 2 failed years, so the 3rd year of that negotiation. Those negotiations are ongoing. The school board was very cognizant of the implications of these 2 warrant articles as they go forward, depending upon how the negotiations progress. So we wanted to put that out to you right away, that we understand that these are 2 additional significant items that will impact the overall tax impact on the school side of things.
Brian, could you just cover who's in the support staff?
Sure. The support staff would include secretaries, custodians, kitchen workers, and the largest constituency of that are the paraprofessionals, folks who work with special education students and some other support roles. And the teacher's contract includes all of the professional staff. That would include teachers and related service providers, people like reading specialists, special education providers like speech and language therapists, and those kinds of folks. Thank you. On the top of page 3, we wanted to give you an overview of the process that we went through. I think seeing many of you for many years at this point, the process that we went through in developing the budget and the board's consideration was a little different than past years, so we wanted to talk about how that was. Consistent with past practice, the principals came and presented their budget. When we inputted all of the principals' requests, the budget came in about $1.7 million above default. What we then sent out to do was to essentially make adjustments, reductions, and cuts to bring the budget down even with default. As we look at what budget we have, the voters have given to the school district over the last several years, we wanted to start there and say, if we were at default, here's what this would look like. We then strategically built the budget up from there, looking at a series of priorities. Specifically, those priorities focused around safety, teaching and learning, special education, and facilities. Something else that we worked really hard to be able to provide to the Budget Committee and to the school board this year, in your budget detail, the printout, the software program that the school district uses was not able to print actuals. We contacted the company. We had a series of folks who were working on developing a custom report for us. I apologize that we were not able to pull this off, but we wanted to have historical actuals built into the budget detail that you were given. You do get that information in an Excel spreadsheet from Mr. Labor, but we tried really hard to have that printed right on here. But that's essentially how we worked on developing the budget. We went line by line. We compared what's the historical spending, what are the actuals, and do we need to adjust the account up or down. So consistently throughout this document, you'll see adjustments, some up, some down, but more based on our historical spending and going through a comprehensive analysis of our actuals. A couple other things that are a little different for the committee's consideration. One of the things that we focused pretty heavily on and shared with the school board were two elements that have contributed significantly over the last several years historically to the school district's unreserved fund balance. We know in the past we've budgeted revenues in a very conservative way. I know revenues aren't necessarily the focus of the Budget Committee. But two elements that contribute significantly have been teacher turnover money and reductions in health insurance. So what we did is we provided for you a chart. The bottom of page 3 shows the variance from GMR, which is the guaranteed maximum price of our health insurance, to what we actually spent. And if you look at a multi-year average, we're looking at about $300,000 or so that the school district realizes in savings when there is a reduction after the actual rate is set. Right now, we have a guaranteed maximum rate. That's what the budget is built on for our health insurance savings. But we know historically that it's come in even a little bit under, makes a significant difference. We built this budget with that in mind. Some school districts will specifically underfund certain lines because they're expecting that there might be a reduction in a line like that. We purposely cut things out that we think are important to the instructional programs in each of the respective schools, hoping that there might be some money available. The next piece, at the top of page 4, I promise you I can't read any of those numbers, but I'm quite sure that they talk about a 13% average GMR with a variance of about 3% historically over 13 years. So we know that whatever we get for a guaranteed maximum rate, history has taught us that it comes in a little under. And that little under, when you look at all of the costs associated with our benefits, adds up. So we just want you to know, we know that, and we built the budget anticipating that there might be some savings in that regard. The middle slide focuses on what we call teacher turnover money. If we have retirements, and right now we've been notified of one retirement that is a guarantee, and we've been notified that there are several others who are considering retirement. They've essentially put the school district on notice, but they haven't officially declared, and they reserve the right to do so in the spring. But when we look over time, if you have an expensive teacher, a top-end teacher retire, historically we've replaced that teacher with more of an entry-level person, and there's money to be reclaimed in the staffing lines as part of that, to the tune of about $300,000 annually. So when we come to you and we say, these are the teachers, these are the positions that we have, here's what we're expecting them to cost, on average, it's coming in a little under that. So what we did was, using those two essentially areas of potential anticipated savings together, we made some intentional, conscientious cuts to the proposed budgets that the principals presented, anticipating that we would be able to realize some money to help fund some of those elements as we go forward. And those focuses really are, the foci are on safety, technology, and facilities. And I'll talk a little bit more as we continue to go, and you'll hear those themes throughout each of the principals' presentations.
I'm sorry.
Please.
Can I just ask a question? I heard you, but I just want to make sure I got this right. So the health insurance line and the salary line for teachers is budgeted at what, without taking this amount
Correct.
into account. That amount has been taken into account in other areas that have been cut.
Right.
So,
And in the past, the practice had not been to anticipate any money in those two areas. It's a new methodology that we brought forth this year.
okay.
So in the past, right now, as I said, we know we have one retirement. But if you get 5 or 6 of them, they add up pretty quickly if you've got a top step teacher and you replace that person with an entry-level person. So we have, in the past, as the budgets have been developed, that variance was not accounted for intentionally as the budget was being developed. It was a new way that we did it this year.
So if somebody comes in and looks at this stuff and says, well, hey, we can save $300,000 on our health insurance, and it looks like they didn't budget for that, and they cut that, that's going to screw up your plan because you're expecting that money. You've made sure that you can cover your health insurance, but you're expecting that there's going to be some leftover funds that will
we're
go to other things.
hoping that there would be. And really, Elizabeth, what we've tried to do here is be as transparent with the funds that we have as we possibly can. We're telling you where the money is. Here's where we think we might be able to pick up some savings. And specifically, we already know what we want those savings to be directed towards. So in the past, as presentations have gone to the Budget Committee, you haven't talked about those particular areas. But historically, based on a multi-year average, there's money on the table in each of those accounts, and we built the budget hoping and anticipating that we'd at least realize a portion of those reductions or savings.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
So, if you were to look at what you're showing us here, telling us, you could possibly realize $600,000 in savings.
Maybe up to,
Right.
based on a multi-year average.
Numbers here are at 641, but you could potentially.
I think that's why, if you think about the school district budget over the last several years, even when we've had budgets below default or at default, and we've had significant cuts, we've sat at this table and have cut positions and then turned around and had a unreserved fund balance at the end of the year. And I think some people said, well, how does that happen? This is how it happened. So what we really wanted to do, I'm not asking you to cut $300,000 out of the budget, just to be perfectly clear about that.
Right, that's what I'm trying to make sure.
But what we've done is we're trying to be as transparent with you as we can to say, here's what we know about the budget based on a multi-year history. We expect to pick some money up here, and here's what it might be. So we're just being direct and straightforward with all of you folks.
You've mentioned the default budget a few times now. What is the default budget over the current year's budget?
Mr. Labor will speak to that when he comes up next. He's got his presentation will go through the default calculation. He'll talk about the methodology of how that was done and the variance based on that. Any other questions about either of those pieces? Okay. Moving on to page 5. The priority areas that you'll see in this budget and are represented in each of the principals' presentations focus on safety, teaching and learning, special education, and facilities. In the area of safety, when we built the budget, we included new what are interior locks. There's actually a name. They're called Columbine locks. Not a pleasant name, but essentially what they are is if we had any kind of an emergency situation in our schools, all of our locks currently require the teacher to take a key, go outside into the hallway, lock the classroom door, and then go back in. There are new locks available now that increase the safety in our schools that allow locking from the inside and to be able to secure the room without the teacher going out into the hallway. That was included. We included panic devices, and mostly in our offices. Proximity card readers are, it's like a keyless entry where you have like a scanner card. Folks are probably familiar with that. And then we added a number of cameras, specifically increased cameras at Mountain View, and we added a DVR at Bartlett and Glen Lake. The current camera model at those schools are not web-based. We have a web-based camera system at Maple Ave, at the high school in Mountain View, and we have found the cameras to be an exceptional tool in terms of maintaining the perimeter of our buildings, the safety of our buildings, as well as the interior, both with student issues and if there were any safety-related issues. All of these elements were removed from the budget by the school board. The school board prioritized these safety-related items to the extent that they have committed to moving those projects to this year and are looking to fund those projects this year. So there is no budget impact on these. They were in the budget that was presented to the board, but the board removed them. So I wanted you to be aware of what those were. From a teaching and learn...
Just ask, what is a
Yes.
panic device exactly?
It's kind of like a button underneath a table that if someone came in and was some kind of a threat or there was a concern, it's like a direct 911 line.
Oh, okay.
So it's primarily something that would be located in our offices and would allow for, if there was an emergency situation, to be able to trigger, much like a bank. And unfortunately, the day and age that we live in, we have to think a lot about these different safety and security elements in our schools, and safety really remains one of our highest priorities. We found that when you talk to parents, parents don't care as much about how you're teaching reading and math as much as they do about knowing their kids are safe at school. So that was a priority driver for us.
But can I just, but we're not going to see this in the budget?
You're not going to see this in the budget. These were elements that the board prioritized to such an extent that they removed them and are seeking to do those projects now. And that was about $100,000 worth of projects. That slide. The bottom of page 5, from a teaching and learning perspective, and I'll go through these very briefly, and then the principals, as they present their budgets to you, will expand upon each of these. Next year at Mountain View, we are anticipating the need of an 8th grade teacher. Our current class size projected for next year is 26 8th graders, which is quite a few more than we'd like to see. There's been a small class that's currently in the 8th grade at Mountain View. It's been this smaller bubble that's moved all the way up through. You've probably heard about this bubble as it's gone through. Well, it's at 8th grade now, and when it leaves, the class that's coming in to replace it in 5th grade at Mountain View and for 7th graders coming in from New Boston is a lot bigger. So next year, if we don't look at an adjustment, we're going to have class sizes of 26 in 8th grade. Additionally, we've included 2 part-time library paraprofessionals in the budget. Those are part-time positions that are, I believe, 3.5 hours a day. They're non-benefits eligible positions that would allow us to change the model of what we offer to our kids at Mountain View, allowing the library to be open before school and after school for extended hours for kids to do research, to be able to do homework, and it would increase the efficiency. We have a library media specialist now who spends an awful lot of her time checking in and out books. So you've got a degreed, certified person who's doing an awful lot of clerical work instead of working with kids on research and supporting teachers. At Bartlett School, Mr. Bousquet will talk about, we've added a .5, a half-time library media teacher. Currently, they only have a half-time library media specialist, and we've seen a considerable amount of need in the literacy development of our kids at the Bartlett School. The late buses, I know the Budget Committee is quite aware of the historical late bus program that has been added back in. That was a priority of the school board. The school board has added the late buses back in at both Mountain View and at the high school. Mr. Baines from Crispin's House has also asked and supported this project and talked about the impact, and I think he might plan on either submitting some written testimony to the Budget Committee or perhaps coming and speaking on behalf of the late buses. We have Windows and Microsoft upgrades. We're running older, out-of-date versions of each of those respective programs. We've added money in for professional development for teachers, and we've added money in for technology professional development. Over the last several budget cycles, those are lines that have been cut. Our professional development line, we added $20,000 for teachers. There is a contractual obligation to offer at least $30,000 per the teacher's contract. We upped that line to $50,000. So when you see it, that's what that money is. Moving on to the top of page 6. Continuing from a teaching and learning perspective, we've added money in each of the schools to support field trips and assemblies, replacement furniture. Those 3 items, again, have been cut significantly over the last several years. We haven't had money for field trips. We've asked parents to continue to pay, or the field trips haven't happened. For assemblies, there have been little to no money available for assemblies. We've added money back in. Replacement furniture, we have a lot of old chairs and broken chairs and desks that need to be replaced. Network enhancements, Mr. Geroliman, the technology director, is here in the back. He will speak when we go through the technology budget about needs that we have to enhance the infrastructure of our network, and he'll give you a much more elaborate explanation of that than I'm capable of providing. All of the supply lines and all of the books and printed material, which are our curriculum lines, have been increased. Those are lines that over the last several years have been cut 10, 20%, 25%. As we've gone through the budget process, we've reinstated money into those respective lines to focus on supplies and teacher resources and student resources. For special education, we have a need for an additional special education teacher at Bartlett. That is a position that we currently have at the Bartlett School as a 1-year position. That is a grant-funded position. Grant funds will not be available to support that next year, and the board has put that into the budget. Some of the services that the Budget Committee might be aware that we provide for special education, we've had an increased need for students who have hearing issues or students who are deaf and hard of hearing. As a result, we have a pretty significant increase in those services. In the past or in other school districts, a lot of times those students are placed in out-of-district programs where they're with other students who are deaf or hard of hearing, and we've chosen to educate them here in Goffstown. We do realize a cost savings for that, but we have to be able to provide those services to those kids. And we've added increased summer days for the Mountain View Special Education Administrative Assistant. Currently, she's not on an extended contract into the summer when we have extensive programs occurring, registrations, and all of the related activities that go with running a big special education department at Mountain View. In the facilities line,
I'm sorry. Services provided for charter schools?
services provided for charter schools. Thank you, Elizabeth. And this is a good one to talk about. The Budget Committee might be aware that there have been some changes in the state laws and the state regulations around charter schools. The Goffstown School District is required to provide special education and related services to any children who are eligible for those services who go to charter schools. You might be aware that the number of charter schools has kind of increased in the last couple of years. We've seen an increase in the number of kids. We've got a significant cost impact for about a half a dozen kids attending charter schools. And as we get into the district lines, you'll see those specifically. But that is a requirement that we have to provide those services for those students, and we don't have, as a school district, any input in whether they should or shouldn't be in the charter school. So we're required to provide services for special education services there.
So that's a requirement, and these other items listed under special education, which one of these are things that are going to be done no matter, that are required by law?
I would say all of them except the administrative assistant.
Okay.
Arguably, the first one, the issues with the first one is we're required to provide services per the student's IEP, and you look at how many hours you need to provide, how many teachers you have to provide the hours, and when the numbers don't line up, we end up not being able to cover all of the hours for the kids that we have.
Is there any money involved in the revenue from charter schools? Does it come from the state or federal government?
We get some money for adequacy, but it ends up, for these special education students, it ends up being pennies on the dollar. You know, you get a couple of bucks and it costs you 12 times as much.
Is that a federal regulation or is that a
State.
regulation?
State.
Okay.
State. There are a couple of other, we'll talk about some of the other federal requirements. I don't know if folks are aware of the statutes and the laws around homeless youth. That's one that you'll see another budget increase. That's a federal requirement.
Of the services for the deaf, is that for a Goffstown student?
Yes.
Or for a New Boston or Dunbarton?
No, they're
It is
for
Goffstown. There's no
students,
cost
plural.
sharing.
There's no cost sharing.
Okay.
Any other questions? Under facilities, this budget includes money for repair and maintenance projects that have been problematic over the last several years. When Mr. Agate, who's also here, the facilities director, does his presentation, he'll go through each of those things. One thing that's not included in the budget, not sure if the budget committee is aware, we've had a couple of floods at the high school. We had looked at the board level at providing money to do some drainage mitigation. We've worked with the town, we've worked with an engineering firm to look at some of the projects. We're actually looking, there may be some matching funds available through a grant that is potential through the police department that we're pursuing, if we might be able to look at that. But we have some pretty significant increases in the needs of that flooding area. This is the back of the high school, if you guys are familiar. It's basically a large parking lot that drains directly towards the building. Not a great design, but that's essentially what it is. And most recently, the board received the information that now we're realizing about a $40,000 increase in our property and liability insurance because of the repeated pattern of the water damage. So under facilities, we've got the maintenance projects that Jerry will speak to. At Bartlett, we have the addition of some summer custodian hour days. It's an older building. It's harder to clean. It's harder to keep clean. And we've struggled to keep up with the demands of cleaning it over the summer. We've added days for that. District-wide, we've added a position that is 4 hours a day to focus on grounds. One of the things that we continue to notice is the exterior of our buildings. The plants, the shrubs, the trees are overgrown, they're neglected. When you come up to the buildings, there are weeds growing everywhere, there's trees that are overgrown, and we'd like to focus on improving that and having a nicer facility that when our folks go up, it's better maintained. Wanted to talk to the Budget Committee a little bit about the status of Dunbarton. I'm not sure how much information you guys may or may not have, so I'm happy to expand or reduce as needed. The Dunbarton School Board and the Goffstown School Board have negotiated a memorandum of understanding for tuition for next year. It's been approved by both boards, but it only applies to current 9th, 10th, or 11th grade students. There will be no students at Mountain View next year from Dunbarton. Their contract with Bow does not allow kids to come to Mountain View except under a couple of unusual circumstances that there's a state law that allows parents to request a change of school assignment based on the best interest of their child. So there may be a couple, but as of right now, we're not anticipating any kids from Dunbarton at Mountain View. At the high school, the current 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, there are 97 kids that would be eligible to go to Goffstown High School next year. And to date, we've only been notified that there are 4 that want to go to Bow. So the good news is we're keeping the majority of the current 9th, 10th, and 11th graders from Dunbarton, but each year you'll continue to see a cohort of kids that as they graduate are no longer in the revenue stream on the revenue side of the budget. I think it speaks to the quality of the program that we offer, that people want to stay here, and it's just certainly a variable that I think the Budget Committee needs to be aware of. Any questions on that?
I do. So how many kids are we losing then at Mountain View?
We're losing about 50 plus.
Wouldn't that even out with the bubble that's moving?
It doesn't. It doesn't. And when Mountain View presents their budget, they'll go through those projections with and without. We have tables with and without the Dunbarton kids. It certainly was not our intention to bring forth a staffing recommendation when you think about the population of the school is going to go down. We looked at, could we eliminate or shift a 5th grade teacher, a 6th grade teacher? Could we move somebody up to that 8th grade level so that we could try to minimize that impact? And we can't do it without impacting, making the other class sizes go up kind of equally dramatically. But we'll go through each of those scenarios. The next few slides, I know the Budget Committee is familiar with these. These have been updated for your demographic and historical information. Our historical enrollment is really stayed even. And I think this is something that's unique to Goffstown and also to New Boston. The majority of school districts in sort of the south central region of New Hampshire have had decreasing enrollment. So their enrollment has gone down. They were able to eliminate positions, still maintain their programs and their class size, and realize cost savings. We've seen really steady enrollment. Our enrollment hasn't decreased, hasn't increased dramatically. It's just been stable. The projected class sizes for next year, again, you can see both Bartlett and Maple, the different grade levels, and we're hovering in the 20s, the low 20s, and Mountain View, the same place except for that 8th grade. That 8th grade class size of 26 is concerning to us. And if you've ever spent any time with that many 8th graders at one time, I think you'll appreciate why. At the top of page 8, I go through and provide for you the cost per pupil. I think folks are aware, but this is calculated by the state. There's a formula, and this is put out every year by the state. This is for the 11-12 school year. It's always behind like that. But you can continue to see that Goffstown is below the state average cost. And we've listed some comparable districts there just for your consideration. The cost per pupil at the bottom continues, and again, you can just see where we line up compared to other districts. And again, there aren't very many districts below us from a per pupil cost, and certainly none that have the performance that we're able to achieve. Bottom of page 8 includes the average salaries. You can see where Goffstown comes in compared to neighboring districts. On to the top of page 9, just to provide some historical information about our free and reduced lunch program. We've realized increases in most of our buildings in our free and reduced population. Middle slide, English language learners continues to increase, and we currently have 27 kids with 18 kids on monitor status. That would be another one of those examples, Mr. Fletcher, of different programs that we're required to provide for kids. If a child moves here who doesn't speak English, we're required to provide extensive service and programs for them. Our special education numbers and populations are identified on the bottom of page 9, and we average about 15% of our children have special education needs, which is a little below or at the state average depending on the grade level. As a general overview and as an introduction to the series of presentations that you'll continue to hear over the next several nights, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you'd like to wait and have any detail more specifically for the principals. Yes.
You mentioned that you're increasing spending on faculty development, I think you said?
Professional
And
development.
Professional development because that's required by contracts, but there hasn't been a contract for 2 years. I was wondering.
Even though there hasn't been a new contract, the old contract remains in place. So in the current contract, there's a requirement for the district to provide $30,000 of professional development for teachers for courses and workshops and that sort of thing. We've added money onto that. Part of the reason on the revenue side, folks might be aware of a program called Title IIA, which is money that historically the feds have given us to do training and professional development for teachers. That amount of money continues to decrease every year. So as we have new programs and new training that we need to provide for teachers, we have less and less money to do the training. That's the rationale for that. Yes, sir.
I guess since the last couple of years, when you came down with the English language learners, has that come under the ESOL
Yes.
program?
That's the same thing. They've changed the name a couple of times. ESOL is English for Speakers of Other Languages.
Right.
Same program.
How many do we have this year that are in this program?
Those numbers are what I gave you right there. It's the 27 active right now, with 18 that we're required to monitor.
And then in this physical year?
That's right now.
Okay.
We don't know what next year will bring.
What did you have last year?
Less.
So we're seeing every year more kids coming in where they're going to need special education and learning English. And that's because of probably the workforce housing projects and a lot of the immigrants from other countries coming into our state.
Yeah.
You see this in the paper all the time.
And one of the things, Sonny, that we're really concerned about is the new condo or apartment complex behind, formerly known as Shaw's. Mr. Labor and I have met with the folks upstairs. We've gone through the plans. We're familiar with what we're expecting. The projections of the town are not consistent with what we've realized. So when we look at the anticipated impact of those 48 units, 48, right? 48. Those 48 units, the town is speculating a certain percentage number of children per unit. If we look at the apartments next to Rite Aid, the number that we realize is higher than what they projected. So we're a little concerned about those apartments. If they were all elementary school kids, we've got a problem. If they're spread out, we'll be able to take them in and it won't be a major issue, unless they're 8th graders. 8th graders would be bad. But, as we develop the budget, we considered the impact of those apartments. We did not increase anything in anticipation of increased need. But ELL, the English language learners, that could very well be a variable or a factor. We didn't add anything for it. We know that they're accepting applications now. It's our understanding that they're going to keep people in there in January. So we expect to start to see those kids start to enroll in school in the next couple of months. Anything else I can explain a little further? They have not. They have not. I would hope that, optimistically, maybe in the next couple of weeks, we've been negotiating and progressing forward, both the board and the board's negotiating team and each of the respective unions for better part of, feels like longer, but I'm sure 2 months or so.
The late buses, you're talking about two, one for the high school, one for the middle school?
Right.
Has there been any discussion of having those be parent supported?
There has not been. There has not. That was not discussed at the school board level. I think part of what might make that a little tricky is there are some kids who take it every day.
Right.
For example, what Mr. Baines explained to me is that when the late bus at Mountain View was cut, the enrollment in the after-school program went down considerably because kids used to be able to stay in the after-school program, get help with their homework, and then they could take the late bus home, and it allowed families to get home, and the kids would meet them there. So when that late bus was cut, the enrollment in those programs decreased. Not to speak for Mr. Baines, but what he continues to tell me, and I certainly understand and see, is what we know about teenagers is before their parents get home from work is when they are the least supervised. So the thinking is if we could add those programs in, we would hope to see an increase in kids staying after for tutoring, extra help, kids who are able to participate in the play, sports, etc. But we didn't consider a fee-based.
As a parent whose child would play school sports and would use the late bus, believe me, I cannot tell you how often I have said, I wish we had a late bus. It's something that I would be willing to pay for. And I don't know if other parents share that.
We take cash, don't we, Ray?
But I mean, I don't know if it's a sentiment. It always gets cut.
Yeah.
It never makes it through this process. And it's just an alternative idea that if parents are willing to pay for it, it's a service that only a small group of students use, relatively speaking. It's a service that parents could pay for. They could still get.
I like the idea.
With
I mean,
obviously
I don't know.
Some funds reserved for students who have financial hardship.
I mean, I might defer that back to the board for their consideration. I think this was something that the board was definitely supportive of, but we didn't consider that.
And I would put an alternate perspective out there is one thing we know statistically is when you get to the middle school and the high school ages, parents don't pay for after-school activities where they might for your elementary school. And it's well documented. I mean, this is what happens. You see after-school programs in the elementary school, and there's a fee. It is not uncommon to have a middle school or even a high school after-school program that operates without a fee. Typically not high school because they can kind of supervise themselves, but you have that middle area in your middle school, and a lot of parents do choose to send their children home because they don't pay for the care. Elementary, you have no choice. You can't send your first grader home alone. When you're 5th, 6th, 7th, you might say, yeah, Timmy can go along for an hour and a half, 2 hours. It is statistically supported that the amount of parents willing to pay for after-school care and those sorts of things does decrease significantly to the point where it's difficult.
Well, I'm not
to
talking
support.
about paying for the care. I'm talking about paying
Right.
for the transportation.
Right, but
And
it's
then I
still
think
an
that's
extra
But that's a
expense.
different motivation for a lot of parents because then they're thinking, I can pay my money and then I don't have to drop what I'm doing and go pick the kid up.
Let's hold these discussions after we've had when we get into the individual schools and start talking about that right now. I just want to get the overview of the budgets, the district budget, and get the information out there, and then we can go further later. Get deeper later. Any other questions for Brian?
Hopefully not about the cow. I'm not sure that I understand what the cow is, but
Long story.
You
okay.
don't want to know.
All right. I don't know if it's good or bad that it didn't get offered to me. I'll just let that roll off me.
It's a stress cap.
I'm okay. Okay.
All righty, I think we're ready for Ray, right?
Okay.
Can you hand that to
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you,
Hand it to who?
Joe.
Yeah.
That way. Thank you.
Mr. Labor.
Thank you. Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Ray Labor, the business administrator over at SIU 19. We'll be talking to you this evening about the district budget for the Goffstown School District. And the district budget is known as the 000 location when you look through your detail packages. The district location includes services and programs that apply to all of our schools Kinds of things included in there are the technology office. We have our technology director, for example, that provides services to each and every one of the schools. We have our facilities director and a district maintenance person also budgeted in that district line. Again, those individuals providing services to each of the schools inside of the district. Special education lines. The school district typically budgets all of its special placement costs and special education teacher costs, as well as all of the therapy providers and other support individuals, again, that typically work across each of the schools within the district. Also within the district line, and we'll start going through some of this detail, are the bus contracts for the year, both regular education and special education transport. And last but not least, is all of our school board administration expenses. This will be the cost of running the school board, the cost for district audits, legal fees, and the like. We'll get into this as we go through the detail. So the packages that we're going to be looking at tonight, again, the structure is the 000 location. And I've broken this down in kind of an MS-27 format that the Budget Committee has used in the past. That's pretty much identifying the regular education line, the 1100 function, special education, a 1200 function, and others. We'll go through these as we go through the detail. Each of the breakouts, when you look at them, you're going to see salary and wages. Again, to relate those numbers back to your detail packages, you're going to want to equate those to all of the 100 accounts. Benefits are summarized individually here. Those are all of your 200 accounts that you're going to see in your detail package. Purchase services are going to include accounts 300 through 599. Supplies and software are typically all of your 600 accounts. And equipment is all of the 700 accounts. So that's kind of the roadmap if you're trying to relate these numbers back to your individual detail packages. Okay? So what we're going to take a look at here in the comparison and contrast that we'll review are the current year budget, which is identified as 2014, and the proposed budget from the school board, which is identified under the 2015 column. Pete, you had a question earlier as far as what was the default budget for this current school year. We're looking at it. The 2014 number is the default budget. That's what the voters provided the school district last March. So everything you're looking at here is the jump off from default. So going down again for regular education, this is on your first page, the bottom. Salary and wages have gone up from $405,000 to $446,000. The primary driver there is the actual substitute line for teachers inside the school district based upon actual expenses that we've seen over the past 3 years. The school board did make a decision to increase that particular budget from $220,000 to $250,000 per year to cover 4 substitutes that do come in.
So we're not paying them more, we're using them more.
We're using them more. Yeah. There is a slight increase in some of the wages, and these would be for non-union staff, like our functional managers and a couple of other folks that do not belong to any of the unions, whether it be GEA or GESS. Benefits, we're looking at a slight decrease there, and then that's based upon actual plan usage as we know it today. Purchase services, there's an increase of $3,000 there, and that's primarily tutoring costs. Again, based upon actual cost observation, we really needed to make a slight adjustment there. Supplies and software, you'll see a significant increase from $5,000 this year to $23.8K for next year. Reason for the increase there, one of the large drivers is a library software management program that we would like to bring into play to update a rather antiquated control program that we currently have. This would be a management tool available to each librarian in each school library within the district. That has an estimated cost of $10,000. The other items in there include all of the antivirus software for every computer within the school district, also licensing fees, again, for the entire fleet of computers within the school district. We have an equipment line, which includes primarily the Cisco phone system and some network maintenance activity. This is Mr. Geroloman's line. He'll be talking to you in more detail later on during the school district presentations, but we're projecting a slight decrease there from $16,000 to $11,000. So all in all, at the district level, we're looking at about a $44,000 increase over this year's budget, $20,000 of which, again, is tied back to the increase in the substitute line, and the balance is tied to the software associated with the library management program and district licenses in antivirus software. Okay. We move on to the second page. We're going to talk about the special education lines, 1200, and the 1260 function. The 1260 function, Sonny's example, is the ELL programs that you had talked about with Mr. Balke earlier. Okay. Highlights and major movements within these two functions. First one is in the salary and wages line, and there's an increase from this year at $190,000 to next year about $290,000, a $100,000 increase. And again, the reason for that is primarily a different way of treating or following the accounting for the staffing costs associated with the extended school year program, special education services again. The ESY program is, you might want to consider it as summer school, and I'm going to duck here from my colleagues. They might think of it differently, but these are services provided to our special education students over the summer months. In the past, the way the school district had budgeted for these summer programs was to include a cost in the tuition line. A few years ago, what would happen would be that the school district would actually use outside service providers and send kids off to these programs, and then there was a mix. We would also have kids here, and they would be taught by our own staff over the summer. The majority or lion's share of ESY services are now provided by the district and the teachers within the district. So what we've done is to move all costs out of that 561 tuition account, and we're now treating them as a regular 100 line, which you'll see in your salary detail when you go through it. Under the benefits line, a slight increase from $80,000 to $116,000. That's the cost of the benefits associated with the staffing that we're bringing in for primarily the summer programs. Purchase services, there's a significant increase there from $1,452,000 to $1,520,000. This line includes placement costs, whether they be in residential or day programs, for the known complement of students that we currently have in the school district, which are requiring those services. We talked about special education support that we need to provide Goffstown students attending charter schools a little bit earlier this evening. $101,000 of our school district budget is earmarked specifically for that kind of support. Finally, supplies and software. We have an increase from this year's $500 number to a budget request for $10.5K. And that cost increase is associated with new special education testing materials and software that the school district desires to bring into play and to put into use.
Ray, on 561, or the salary, wages, and benefits, with all, all those costs, including the benefits, including the tuition line?
They were in the tuition line in prior years, Pete, yes.
The
whole thing.
Also.
Yep. Okay. Moving down to bottom of page 2, we are looking at the co-curricular and summer school programs under the 1410, which is the co-curricular function, and 1430, which is the summer school function. The salary lines under this particular grouping primarily are associated with athletics. This would include the athletic director and all of the coaching stipends that are paid to coaches both at the middle school and at the high school. A very small portion of those numbers are actually associated with the teachers and staff conducting summer school programs. If you want those numbers, it is in the detail package under the 1410 and 1430 accounts. Benefits, again, there's an increase from $90,000 to $103,000. And those numbers, again, reflect actual benefit elections as we understand them currently. We do have individuals that are moving, for example, from single or two-person plans to family plans based upon changes in their family setups. Yes.
Can I ask you about the previous slide? You
Sure.
mentioned summer special education programs.
Yes.
Are those mandated by law?
They're mandated by individual education plans or IEPs.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are instruments that are in play, detailing all of the services that a school district needs to supply to its special education students.
So the health plan that the school district has, you guys don't use the is that healthcare plan tied at all to the town's healthcare plans? Like I know some things you guys jointly negotiate for.
Yeah, they're separate. They aren't tied to the town.
To the town, since the town's looking at a 15% increase, and you guys look like you're almost flat.
As Mr. Balke had indicated earlier, what we're trying to do is mitigate increases to the extent that we possibly can.
Okay.
So, yeah. We are looking at an increase in GMR this year.
Okay.
The 10.5% premium increase for health insurance?
Yep. Okay, and lastly, again, supplies and software, that stays flat from this year. All in all, we're looking at just under a $7,000 increase for those two functions. from this year to next. The next grouping that we'll take a look at is at the top of page 3, and we're looking at the 2100 functions and the 2200 functions. 2100 typically includes all of our guidance, physical therapy, occupational therapies, and the like, speech. The 2200 function is typically library and media services. You'll see those details again as you review your packages. Salary and wages primarily are flat from 128.5K to just about 130,000. The notation there is technology staff. That's where we do budget for all of our district technicians and service providers. You'll see those under the 2290 function when you review your detail. Benefits, again, we're looking at pretty much a flat situation, again, based upon actual plan participation as we know it. Purchase services moves from 47.6K to just about 71,000. As Mr. Balke had shared with you earlier, professional development lines for our teachers have increased by about $20,000. And this is, again, in anticipation of losing some revenue out of Title IIA, and we're attempting to offset that so we do not jeopardize our teacher development programs, professional development programs. Supplies and software, again, relatively flat, 25,000 to 23,000 next year. That includes primarily all of our guidance and testing materials. So for those two functions, we're looking at an increase of $23,000 from this year till next. And again, the increase is associated with the professional development lines. The bottom exhibit on page 3 talks to school board expenses, which is the 2300 functions. That includes the school board operations, includes election services. The school district does need to absorb some of the expenses associated with the municipal elections each year. We're also going to be absorbing expenses this year for the special meeting, which is scheduled for December 4th, everyone. Please go out and vote and support the area agreement that we're trying to negotiate with New Boston. So this will be, again, would be paid out of this family of accounts, the costs associated with that. Purchase services, as we go down through it, you'll see audit. There's an annual audit cost. We're projecting an increase in our audit cost to $10,500 this year. Things to remember there during your review is we're just coming off a 3-year fixed price, flat price arrangement with our current auditor. We are looking at a host of new regulations from the feds, which are going to require a lot more scrutiny by the auditors that are going to be researching our books and coming up with financial reports. We talked about election services. Our district advertising line is included in here. The advertising line is the help wanted ads that we need to place in the paper, and the cost of our subscription to Ed Jobs New Hampshire, where we advertise all of our open positions. The SAU assessment is also included in that line, and there's a projected increase of $285,000 from this year to next for the SAU operation. A couple of comments on that. It is a significant increase. Dunbarton is moving on, which is going to cause the remaining districts, Goffstown and New Boston, to absorb a larger share in the cost of the operation of the SAU. Also included in that is a rather significant repair and renovation action associated with the cupola on top of the superintendent's building. Recent inspection by both town inspectors and independents that we have brought in have indicated that there's a significant amount of decay in the framing, causing that structure to be pretty much unstable at this point and in need of either repair or replacement. There's a discussion going on right now, although the building is not on any historical register, the town does desire for it to be maintained in its current state, which would require, again, the removal and repair or rebuild of that cupola. The cost associated with that right now is about $75,000. Also included as part or result of the last inspection conducted by the town is the need for resurfacing of the parking lot in front of the SAU building. The town is of the opinion that that is an SAU or school district responsibility to maintain the parking area. What we've included there is a 2-inch overlay. And that's up for discussion as we go down the road a little bit further. But the effect of a 2-district SAU now and the significant costs associated with repaving and renovation of the building itself is driving a large part of that increase. The SAU budget is, by no stretch of the imagination, final. The budget was presented to the SAU board back in October. They will be meeting again in early December, conducting a public hearing on the budget, and then making a final determination of what is included and what will be assessed back to the participating districts. So stand by on that. That number is likely to change, and I would expect it would change in the downward area.
Ray, what was when I originally attended the meetings on the Dunbarton situation, they were talking about a cost to Goffstown. It could have been about $1.1 million, I believe was the number. I got it written at home. Is that actually what happened?
Cost to Goffstown, for increased cost share?
Yeah.
If you take a look at the relationship across the board, and what I mean there is probably the SAU piece that we're looking at, as well as the potential for increased tuition costs or absorbing operating costs that aren't going to be compensated by revenue dollars from Dunbarton. Yeah, Pete, that would be the ballpark number. We would gradually approach that number over the next 3 years, as Mr. Balke had indicated earlier. We're going to be looking at just 3 grades in the high school from Dunbarton next year. Following year, it'd be 2 grades, then 1, much like Bedford when it withdrew from Manchester West. Eventually, we'll get there, but that is the ballpark, the $1.1 million. Okay, let's move on to page 4. This is administration and fiscal services. These are the 2,400 and 2,500 functions. There's a significant decrease here, 26.5K year on year. The major driver on this one is the salary and wage pool for the administrators. This is a pool of money that's budgeted each year to cover salary or wage adjustments for all of the administrators working inside the district. Has been budgeted traditionally about $36,000 upon administration review this year. It was reduced by $20,000. That reduction was made to put that budget in line with what we've seen in the way of actual costs year on year. Benefits were always tied to the level of that salary pool. Taking it down dropped the formula for benefit calculations, and that's now down to $4,300. We have a $2,000 increase in administration professional development. We had talked about professional development lines for our teachers earlier. This is a separate account to cover the cost of workshops and seminars that our administrators attend. And again, actual costs kind of warranted an increase of $2,000 in that particular account. The fees line, the $1,500 line there, is associated with annual financial reporting to Wall Street. You recall the school district did go out and refund bonds in November of 2010. As part of that financing arrangement, the district needs to report to the street annually the results of its fiscal operations year on year. We have an agent that does that work for us, and that service fee is $1,500 to do all of the filing and coordination work required with that reporting. Bottom of page 4, building and grounds. These are all of the 2,600 functions. These include the building and grounds. And we had talked earlier about our district level personnel being involved with the salary and wage lines. This is the director, secretary, and district level maintenance staff are included in these lines. Mr. Balke had talked about hiring a new grounds person at pretty much a half-time rate. That position is also included in that line and is one of the drivers moving the budget from $138,000 this year to $155,000 next year. Benefits, again, are based upon actual enrollments as we know them currently. Purchase services is a significant increase, and let's talk about that a little bit. Mr. Balke had talked about our property and liability insurance increasing about $40,000 from this year to next. The reason for that is the flooding situations, 2 flooding situations that we've had at the high school in the past 5 years. Property Liability Trust, the old local government center, is now moving into an experience-based premium arrangement. We've had 2 significant losses inside the school district, again within the past 5-year window, and that's driving the increase. We're moving from about $98,000 this year in premium to $140,000 next. Honeywell Phase 2, some of you have probably heard of this one. This is the second phase of the Honeywell Energy Management Project that was kicked off by the school district back in 2004. There are a new series of enhancements that are being put in place at all of our schools as we speak. Examples are moving Mountain View from an oil-fired setup for heat in the winter to a complete propane setup. At the high school, we're also doing the same kind of thing, converting from oil to propane, but we're maintaining a dual fuel capability at the high school, where we'll be able to burn both number 2 heating oil and propane with a simple flick of a switch on the burners. Reason for doing that is to, again, hedge our bets in the future and have the ability to use whichever fuel happens to be most economical. Propane, as an example, folks, and one of the major benefits for making this move is we're looking at a per gallon cost for heating oil next year at just under $3.20 a gallon. At the middle school and at the high school, we're going to be able to buy propane at $1.43 a gallon. And that $1.43 price is good for the next 3 years. That's an arrangement that we were able to strike with one of the fuel suppliers. The savings in fuel alone are going to be enough to cover the annual cost associated with Phase 2, the lease purchase arrangement that we had set up with Honeywell for the new equipment that's coming in is going to require us to make a payment of about $165,000 per year.
How many years?
15. The savings that we're projecting right now, and these are guaranteed savings, Pete, same as the original arrangement. Honeywell is guaranteeing a savings of at least $185,000 per year over 15 years. So that says we're 20 grand to the good between the cost of the lease and what we're expecting for savings. So the takeaway here is that through cost avoidance, we're able to cover the cost for all of the new equipment that we're putting in and reap the benefit of a much more efficient operation. Any questions on that? Okay, last line item, supplies and equipment. Again, we're moving from $10,000 to $8,000, and this is really nothing more than the cost of fuel for the district's 2 pickup trucks and tractors. That's all that's here. And again, we're moving from a traditionally budgeted number to one based upon actual cost expenditures. So we're able to pick up a couple of $1,000 there. Top of page 5 is a quick summary of our transportation costs for the district. We had talked a little earlier about the late buses coming back into the budget this year. And that's one of the drivers to move us from $1,080,000 to $1,152,000. The late buses are $26,000 a piece. We're looking at 2 of them. The base and the balance of that increase is associated with contract cost escalators for the last year of a 5-year contract. Sped transportation, we have a contract with the provider. It too will be entering the last year of a 5-year arrangement. Costs are primarily flat. That's based on use primarily. Homeless transportation, again, was addressed a little bit earlier by Brian. And these are requirements placed on the school district to cover transportation costs for homeless students. Again, based on actuals, we are needing to make a request for an additional $2,500 to cover that particular item. Last line here is the professional development costs associated with all of the support staff and part of the GESS contract. That stays flat. The contract calls for a $9,500 budget each year, and we'll be carrying that into next year. Okay. Any questions there? I have a quick summary slide here on default budget. If you do flip to the next page in your handout package, we'll try to give you, without burying you in detail, a sense for how the default budget is calculated year on year. We start with the current operating budget for the year that we're currently in. That number for the general fund, and I'm going to limit our comments pretty much to the general fund and not address special revenue or food service. Neither of those two have a tax implication. General fund does, so let's direct our attention there. Our general fund budget this year, which also happens to be the default budget for this year, is $35,230,000 or $230,989. This year is the fifth in a row of the school district operating at default or below default. Just a little editorial comment, sorry. The adjustments to and how we get to default calculations. We're able to include any bond principal and interest payments that we make. We do have the refund bonds that are outstanding and will be maturing in 2021. The decrease in premium costs or interest costs associated with the bond issue is what's driving that $25,000 reduction this year. All of our salaries, taxes, and benefits for positions that are currently in the budget this year are allowed to be calculated as part of the default. If there are any new positions that are being requested by the school district, those are not allowed as part of the default calculation. So Mr. Balke had talked about adding a grade 8 teacher at Mountain View for the upcoming year. That position is not included in this default calculation. Our regular education transportation costs, day-to-day busing costs, are allowed in default. All of the special education expenses, again, which we've talked about in a little bit of detail earlier on, these are primarily driven by IEP again, and services that we need to provide to our student population are allowed as part of the default calculation. Regular education tuition is allowed as part of it. For Goffstown, that regular education tuition line is what we pay the Manchester School District for the kids that do attend MST for vocational training in schooling. Property insurance is included. We talked about the increase there a little bit earlier due to the flooding situations. We include all of our energy costs, our fuel and electricity charges. We had talked about the savings between heating oil and propane. That's reflected here in the calculation. The district, the school district, did join with the town of Goffstown in a wholesale purchasing arrangement for electricity. What we're showing there is a savings, a net savings as a result of that move of about $40,000. So that's a decrease in the allowable number going into the default calculation. We talked about SAU services. Again, by contract, that cost is an allowable in the default. We had talked about our audit going up, projected to go up by about $1,000 due to additional federal reporting regulations and the need to negotiate a new contract. And as we go further on down, we talked about the professional development lines for teachers and support staff. Given that they are contractual in nature, they are included in the calculation of the default budget. Finally, the lease costs for Honeywell. We had talked about Phase 2 and Phase 1. Our Phase 1 payment is $147,000. With the introduction of Phase 2, that payment goes to $314,000 for next year. Next year will be the last year that the school district will be making payments on Phase 1 and bringing Phase 2 in. After that finishes, we'll be, after next year, 14-15 school year finishes, we'll be moving from $314,000 back to about the $165,000 level. So all of the allowable increases and net effect of the decreases, when summed, total $904,000. That's the magic number which is added to this year's general fund budget, the $35,230. That results in a default budget for 2014 and 15 of $36,135,385. The default, next year's default, is a 2.57% increase over this year's general fund budget or default budget. The school board's proposed budget that they're putting in front of you folks totals $36,429,124. It is a 3.4% increase over this year's budget. It's an 0.8% increase over the default budget calculated for this year. The difference being about the $293,000 that Brian had talked about earlier. That's how we get the default. Hopefully it's of some benefit to you guys as you go through your examinations. The last sheet I have for you is a revenue projection, and we understand that the Budget Committee doesn't really want to get involved with revenue, but to give you a feel for what we're looking at, and you can use it as background information. Our adequacy grant is decreasing pretty significantly. And this is a result of a new cost-sharing formula that the state has put out, and it also reflects an anticipated decrease in revenue associated with the Dunbarton folks moving on to Bow. So the 50 or so children that will be losing out of Mountain View Middle School, adequacy aid associated with them will now move to the Bow School District and away from the Goffstown District. School building aid is another area that we're going to perhaps be affected by. We're projecting about a $20,000 decrease from the state. The school building aid that we're receiving right now is an offset to the high school bond, the refunding bond that we've been talking to earlier this evening. In that we're moving from a 3-district SAU, or area, I should say, to a 2-district area arrangement, there's the potential for a 5% decrease in the amount of aid that we're going to see from the state for building. And that's the result, the potential result of Dunbarton's move to Bow. Other elements on our revenue forecast are catastrophic aid being associated again with special education costs that we incur over and above a calculated formula limit set forth by the state. It has not been fully funded, nor this year. It hasn't been in the past, so we're projecting a slight decrease to $285,000 next year, just in the sake of being conservative. Child nutrition, these are aid payments we receive from the state through the federal government. That remains flat. Grant programs, again, we're trying to get a feel on that. That number will change. Child nutrition programs from the feds, again, this is a federal share. This is primarily associated with the free and reduced lunch program that we run here in the district. Our costs and aid to families in need will come through the feds and typically amount to about $175,000. USDA commodity programs, where we can go out and buy foodstuffs at greatly discounted prices, that is counted as aid, and it's also included in that number. We're projecting a decrease to the tune of about $400,000 in regular education tuition costs. Again, we're going to be losing 50 students from Dunbarton that are currently at Mountain View Middle School. And we're only going to be looking at enrollments in 3 grades at the high school from the upcoming year. This will be grades 10, 11, and 12, which are going to be, I think Brian had shared with us that there are 97 potential candidates, 91 have expressed.
Only 4 have indicated the preference to vote.
Right, so what we're assuming is that calculation. Again, I have a net impact that's calculated as Dunbarton leaves, the operating costs go up, the share goes up, which means that New Boston's tuition is going to increase slightly to pay for Dunbarton's removal. So the net effect is going to be about $800,000 in revenue, lost revenue for Goffstown, where some of the original projections, some of the original numbers that were out there were in the 1.2 to 1.5 range. As we discussed earlier, Pete, we get there over time, not in one fell swoop. Special education tuition, this is primarily associated with kiddos that are in our preschool programs and kindergarten programs. It also includes special services for our high schoolers that are enrolled in the TransVoc program. This is a special set of classes designed for them. And we, the school district, are allowed to charge the sending districts for enrolling in that particular program. That's what drives these revenue amounts. And finally, we're down looking at Medicaid collections and food service funds. Food service being our expected level of sales on the program in 2014-15. We're projecting sales to be $773,000. So our total revenues then would amount to almost $15 million. The appropriation amount, which is on the bottom of that page, is $37,737, which is the proposed operating budget that the school board has put in front of you for 2014-15. These are all projections and guesstimates at this time, but we've got, based upon current knowledge, that would say we would need to raise about $19.5 million through taxation to run the program for next year. And we expect that the state assessment would be somewhere around $3.2 million. Those are dangerous numbers right now. They're based upon estimates, which are using assessed valuations and formulas that are a good year old at this point. So as we get closer and closer, we should be able to sharpen up those numbers and actually determine what that tax rate will be. Just as a point of information, that final tax rate is set in October, so this past October, everybody is aware of the tax rate and the impacts, up or down, on everybody's bill. But for the school portion, that is the rate that was determined by the DRA for operating both the town and the Goffstown School District. And that exercise was completed just a couple of weeks ago. So it's very difficult. This is a lot of moving pieces that continue in play and will continue in play until this time next year before we're able to come up with a final projection.
Ray, does the town inventory affect the school at all?
Town inventory, Pete?
Inventory of the town, the valuation of the town?
Yes, it does. That is used to property inventory, or assessment base. That is used to calculate tax rate for the school district.
And do you have a projected increase in here in the inventory?
I'm using this year's numbers. I have not assumed a projected increase for next year.
So you're using the numbers that the town used, or we used current year?
I'm using the numbers that DRA used
Okay,
to
so
calculate this year's tax rate, yeah. Typically in the past, that's gone up anywhere from 0.5% to 1%. The higher it goes, the lower the rate goes.
But in this past year, it actually didn't go up.
That's right. That's right.
But the town budget we were presented last night included a 0.5%
Yeah, that's fine.
increase in that,
Yeah.
right?
I just wanted to know if in the past we've used 1% and 1.5%. I just wanted to find out what percentage he used. That's the same situation.
Yeah. This version, Pete, again, is flat, assumes no increase in the inventory. And if there are no questions, that's all I have for you this evening.
I have one more question. I might have missed what you said, but the $500 million increase on the salaries, taxes, and benefits on the default budget was from what?
The $500,000 on the 498,000.
Yeah. Pretty close to $500,000.
Yeah. Again, that's the detail sheet that I believe I brought along. See if I can answer your question. That's a roll-up of all of the salary, wages, and benefit lines and associated taxes.
That's an increase of $500,000. There's no contract. That's
Right.
I'm kind of confused.
There are no contract increases for the teachers and support staff included in that calculation, though, Pete. We do have significant increases in our health insurance costs from this year to next. We also have retirement cost increases. That's included in that calculation. And I'm scanning this sheet for some of the major drivers. Again, health insurance is $419,000 of the $500,000 increase that you remarked. Right.
Okay.
That's health insurance, Pete, over the entire population within the school district.
Just thought, I'm not interjecting anything or saying anything, but if in the new contract there was more participation in the health care cost by the teachers or whoever, would that number significantly go down?
You have a flat amount, you have a bill that you have to pay. There are two wallets that are being used to pay for it. So if one contributes more, that means the other, the second wallet, contributes less. Yeah.
Okay. So the default budget's actually could be a fluid number also then.
Yes, yes. Based upon actions that are taken, yeah.
So the total increase to the budget, with the number I came up with, was $1,198,135. Is that pretty accurate?
Over from this year to next, you're talking total budget?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's the ballpark.
But the total increase in that we'd have to collect by taxes is 2.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying actual expenses.
Right, right.
Have
Sonny?
you used any of your contingency money? You know, because last year, the town voted that you could keep 2.5% of
That's
your
right.
money,
That's right.
and you guys could use it for emergency purposes.
Yeah, we can use it for emergency purposes or for tax
Or for
relief.
tax
Right.
relief.
The numbers put in front of you tonight do not anticipate the use of that fund, and that would be a school board decision that would be made this time next year if they wanted to send any of that contingency back to the taxpayers for relief. I'm not assuming use of that bucket at this point.
So nothing in this
Right.
budget is figured into this.
Correct. Yeah.
But that fund is pretty small, right? I mean, it just started.
Yeah, we just.
$275,000 as we
There's
speak.
some money in it.
True, but isn't the idea to kind of build some up so that you'd have it if there's some major...
Just asking if they used any,
Mm-hmm.
that's all.
Well, like we've also talked about where we have that issue with the flooding at the high school, if we do need to take, some sort of construction to mitigate any future risk, then we've talked about using that to cover that expense, because that won't be inexpensive.
Any other questions on this, the Ray's presentation? Okay.
Okay, thanks, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up is the high school.
Can we get that other chair over there so Kim doesn't have to sit in that?
That's all right. She's got the.
I'm good. Now we have extra chairs.
You'll be happy.
Really, these chairs are better.
I knew it was so late. We just gave you pictures, so we figured we'd give you a break from them.
Thank you.
I see you weren't going to sit in that one anyway.
You gotta go get it.
Good girl. All right.
I will.
He dropped his stress ball.
Oh, is he going to take her cow? The cow is off limits.
The cows. I stole that last year and nobody's taken it from me.
We thought we don't get one. I thought we got. Oh,
No, they were in a box.
Yeah, I remember
supposed to
that.
take them and I did.
Yeah, and then you used it quite fervently.
I know, it helped me. Not this one.
Good evening. I'll get right to it and be brief, and feel free to interrupt at any point in time. And as always, I'm joined by Kim McCann, who clearly knows more about our budget than any person in the district. Perhaps maybe Ray. She's the numbers person at Goffstown High School. So from the top, beautiful winter picture. Break the ice a little. The second one, budget changes. You can see the difference between this year's budget and next year's. There's actually a difference, positive difference of $82,417. And if you're interested, I'm told the biggest reason is because of the switch to the propane. Enrollment, you can read them. I will just state when you look, when we do enrollment and we're doing grades to be consistent with what the lower grades do, at the high school, in order for us to consider someone a 10th grader, they have to have X amount of credits. So that's why you see a build-up typically where some kids catch on a tad bit slower, so you might have a little bit of a bump in freshman year, and then again the 298 to 277 and the 262. In 262, I would say ballpark the last few years, we graduated about that 265-ish kids, students. If you turn the page, we go on to staffing. Just give you a little sense of what makes up Goffstown High School from a standpoint of staff. 8 administrators, and maybe I'm just sensitive to that number, is that just we include in there our adult ed director. It's myself. It's Kim. Also in the main office is a dean of students as well, plus a curriculum coordinator. Across the hall, we have a guidance coordinator, and then our special ed coordinator as well, and then a little farther down the hall we have our athletic director. I think, did I get him? Did I catch him all there? I think that's the staff. And as far as teachers, 98.2 full-time equivalents. Paraprofessionals, 38. Secretaries, 7. Custodians, 11. Kitchen staff, 9. Those are the people that make up Goffstown High School. Cost per pupil, and it was alluded to before, mentioned earlier, is that I continue to think that we do a very good job with the money that we are given at Goffstown High School. And there's the picture, figure of the state average, the $13,148 in Goffstown High School, which is $11,048.81. And it's as mentioned, 6 districts spend less. The one figure that we gave, or the one diagram that we gave, it does look better in a big picture. You have a little one there, so if you can't see, which I'm going to guess many of you can't see that well, it's 2013 NECAP science scores. The reason why we use science, it's the last one that's come out. Our juniors, or this year's seniors, took them last year in the spring when they were juniors. The results came out this fall, and once again, we were very, very impressed with our scores. They're at the top of the state. We're the little red bar. Every single little bar in there is a school in the state of New Hampshire. The only 2 that are above us being Bedford High School, great school, Hanover High School, great school. So it's very, very good company that we're in at the top of the state and on the state science NECAP scores. And while I'm there, I will say this year's juniors look like they did a fantastic job. They just recently took the state test. They really looked focused, tried hard. And even every time you have 1 or 2 or 3 kids who struggle to maybe see why they should try their best. And when it was all said and done and the boxes were packed, I think everyone gave it their best effort in the whole school for the juniors, and very impressed. And Kim is Kim does a lot of things at Goffstown High School. That is something, state testing, one of the key factors to our success is that it is unbelievably well run, and Kim is the person who really coordinates that. I stay out of the way and cheer kids on. Cost, did that, okay, flip the page. And with that, now that we get into the real nitty-gritty, I'm going to let Kim take over, and again, feel free to ask any questions as we...
As you can see, much like Brian explained with what they looked at the SAU and the district level as they developed the budget, as we worked with our teachers, as we worked with our department supervisors, things we asked them to keep in mind was how do we maintain the current level of programming that we offer at the high school? How do we continue to provide an equitable and appropriately challenging education for all of our students? And how do we maintain a clean, safe facility for teaching and learning to take place in? So those were the priorities as we went through and we developed the high school portion of the budget. And in that, also keeping in mind the realities of the current economic situation that we are all in. This is a great town, and as we know, there is very limited commercial tax base to support. And we know that this is coming, and these requests are going to be a part of everybody's individual property tax rates, and really trying to be cognizant of that as we go through this process. We also know, and as Brian talked about, we are looking at potentially hopefully, bringing forward contracts for both our professional and our support staff as well. And with that in mind, we tried to look to maintain programming, bringing supply lines pretty much in line with where they have been, bringing them back up to, as you'll see on this bottom piece, to where they typically have been before some of the deeper cuts we've had to make over the last couple of years. There are some areas that you're going to see a market increase. For example, when you go through the individual departments, our technical programming, in the past, we've had a lot of donations of wood to support the woodworking class, for example. And we have not seen those over the last couple of years. So for the first time, there's a pretty large request in there to purchase appropriate supplies and products to keep those courses running and available to students. Other things where you're going to see a few increases as you look through our textbook line. There's about $16,000 in AP texts that we are asking for next year. The College Board has made some pretty significant changes to the AP US History as well as the AP Physics courses. And as they make those changes, our courses are audited annually by the College Board, and we have to annually receive approval based on our curriculum as well as the materials and resources to support those classes to use that AP designation for students and have that on their transcript. And as those shifts take place, it's going to be important that we update the textbooks and the resources available to support those courses. We have some equipment and furniture purchases that we're looking to make. Many of those are tied to supporting our science, our math, our technical programs. We have some storage and facility issues, specifically in the theater area of the building, that we are looking to work with. We had started a couple of years ago doing some lighting and electrical upgrades in the theater. We are in a position where we really need to continue to do that. We are proposing that we start a roughly $5,000 a year contribution to that to start to take out the clandestine lighting, replace it with LED, do electrical upgrades. We had an issue in last February where we realized that some of the electrical work that had been done in there, the panels aren't even labeled. So we had an issue the afternoon that the Wizard of Oz was originally supposed to open, and all of the emergency lighting was out and the batteries were drained, and it took a while for the fire department to come in and help us identify exactly what panels and where those fuses were. So there's some work that needs to be done. You're going to see about $10,000 in there for instrument storage. We have a bunch of old, reapportioned, repurposed bookcases that currently store instruments all over the theater wing of the building, and we are looking to put in some modular equipment, much like up at the middle school, to better keep those classrooms and hallways clear at all times. That's a big piece of it, tied to safety. That wing can very quickly get cluttered. We have a large number of students, well over 100 students that participate in our band, about 75 students that participate in chorus. So there's a lot of people in a small space with a lot of stuff, and looking to do a better job of managing that section of the building.
Excuse me, Kim, is that something you're looking to purchase on the outside? Storage units?
No, it would actually go inside. Right now...
You're going to buy it from the outside?
Yes, yeah. There are companies that specialize in, it's almost like locker-type structures that you can bring in and put in that really can be designed to meet the needs of individual instruments. Whereas right now it's literally shelving, and we just put as many cases as we can, and then it starts to spread quickly. And that really is kind of the overview of where some of those shifts are. We're certainly happy to answer any questions. We don't know how much of an opportunity you've had to go through the budget at this point.
So it says under text, increase enrollment in programs. I'm sorry, I hope you didn't just explain this to me and I spaced
Oh,
out.
no, sorry. One of the areas that we're asking for some additional text is tied to the world language department. We are continuing to see increased interest in Latin at the high school. We've actually had to expand this year the use of our world language staff to accommodate that request. The program has continued to grow. Once upon a time, there was just a Latin 1 and a Latin 2 that was available. Now students can take up to 4 years of Latin. And for the first time, we are running 6 different sections of Latin this year. So we have some textbook needs as students advance to the upper levels of that course. We also are seeing a slight increase in the number of students who are taking our upper level French classes. And in addition to needing a few more textbooks there, we are using a text that is over 10 years old and does not align well with the AP French course that students have the opportunity of taking.
Okay. Are you guys still offering that program last year to help students with math?
Yes.
We asked for a teacher last year and we
Yeah.
didn't give it to you.
Yeah.
But
We were able to shift some of our teaching assignments and get a little creative to offer the math lab. And actually, I was just speaking this morning with Kevin Farley looking at some preliminary numbers after the first quarter, and we are seeing a significant reduction in our failure rates for the first quarter, which was pretty exciting. He shared that our students who struggle the most in math in previous years, we have seen about a 30 to 35% failure rate, and as of the first quarter, it is at 4%. And that is also with the removal of pre-algebra. So it's not even as if we have a tier of students who are taking pre-algebra this year. We have, with the exception of a real small group of special ed students, we do not have anyone in pre-algebra, whereas in the past we would have about 30 to 35 students taking pre-algebra. So they're all in Algebra 1, and that failure rate has gone down significantly as they've had that additional support.
It's impressive to watch. It works.
Yeah.
Especially with how we have blocks, so it's every other day. So you can have your math class on one day, you can have the math support
Math
on
lab,
the following.
yeah.
So it just, I think, and for the unfortunate parents whose kids might not, math doesn't come easy to them, it helps relieve the pressure of trying to do math with your child on a kitchen table too. It works. And I watch kids daily. I just watched Kevin the other day when I was going by with kids. Kevin Farley, one of our administrators, teaches one of them sections as well, and it definitely works.
okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Speak now.
Is this the time to talk about, I still don't get the whole Dunbarton number, the shift in numbers and the bubble, and is this the time to talk about it?
Well, I think this would probably be the time because it does affect the high school, and you've got the SAU staff here that can answer that question. So bring it up.
Okay. I'm just,
Okay,
Yep.
I want to remind anybody that's speaking to make sure you're talking to the mic because we only have limited mics tonight.
all right. So I'm just trying to, you're getting the small class that's graduating from the 8th grade, right?
Yes.
How small are, how much smaller are they from a regular class? Does anybody know, like numbers?
Frank's got the numbers.
See it in there?
Frank's got the numbers?
Frank had the numbers. I do have them. I think it was 50. Continue on.
One of the challenges that we face at the high school as we look at this that is a little more unique from some of the other schools is it's not as clean in terms of the scheduling. So we don't simply look at, okay, there's 250 ninth graders, so we need 10 classes of 25. Because of the flexibility in scheduling that's available. As they are signing up for English classes, math classes, science classes, we are running 14 to 15 sections of an English 9 class. Some of those are going to be honors, some of those are going to be open level classes. In our world history, which is what most ninth grade students take for their social studies class, we also have the AP option. So as students are signing up for those courses and we're trying to build a schedule that allows them to take the appropriate level of math, the world language class, maybe they want to be in band, someone's taking a visual art class,
we're not talking about 10 teachers. And
Okay.
and it's not, okay, so there's 25 less kids, so you just remove a teacher. Because you're talking about those 25 kids spread out over a wide combination of 8 periods every single day.
Okay. But you're also talking about, let's say we're talking about 50 kids. Is that what we're talking about, roughly?
I mean, over the course of time, so right now, if you were to look at Dumbarton, and I would have looked,
Oh, no, I was talking about the small
The
eighth grade.
small eighth grade class.
excuse me, it was, right now, it is 200, Mountain View, 246 in 8th grade versus 7th grade where it's 285. So that 246 would be coming forward.
So that's,
Yeah.
what, 35 kids? 35,
Different,
40
different.
kids? Right around there? Okay,
Yeah.
and you've got maybe 30, on average, 30 kids, less kids from Dunbarton that you're not going to have. It sounds like there's about 30 kids per grade, more or less, from Dunbarton.
25 per grade.
Yeah.
At Dunbarton?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's 80 kids out of your freshman class. So you're going to have 80 fewer freshmen next year than you would have normally if you'd had the Dunbarton kids and if the 8th grade class had been a regular size class. Right? I mean, is that correct?
Is that your understanding?
Would you say
Yeah.
that there were 40
So we
kids?
thought there were 35 from
So
the bubble.
35 and 25, I mean, 60.
60.
Oh, 60, all right,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
60. All right, so that's 60 fewer freshmen. And you have on average 330
Well, that's what-
freshmen. So it's about a fifth.
330,
Yeah.
that's what the kids say. So ballpark, it's, I would say,
Those-
number
Yeah.
280 to 300.
Okay, so
280.
it's about a fifth. It's about a fifth smaller freshman class.
I don't think it will be.
I think we're going from, we typically
Right?
schedule about 280 to 285 true freshmen.
Okay.
So going to 246, 245?
So, and that seems like a fairly significant
Yeah.
number to me, a fifth smaller freshman class.
Yeah.
So,
We also, I know you can't hear.
Yep.
We also had this past year about 17 kids from New Boston register as new freshmen. Mm-hmm. So there are
they
more
weren't previously in the system.
that weren't in the system at all. So just to bring some of New Boston as a tuition number, they're sending, Ray, last night was a number of about 40-something more kids
That's right.
to Goffstown High School than the prior year.
Is that typical? I mean, is that going
No,
to continue?
well, it's hard to know from a demographical perspective. New Boston, I'm sorry to have my back on you.
Study.
New Boston is conducting a demographic study to try to better understand their current enrollment and their projected enrollment, because what we're seeing is people are moving to New Boston with older kids. So they have middle school age kids, they have high school age kids. The elementary enrollment is staying flat, but the number of tuition kids to Goffstown has gone up 40 kids. So in addition to sort of any projections around a reduction in the high school, this year we didn't anticipate for these almost 20 New Boston kids.
Okay.
So it's a factor. I mean, just to,
Yeah, look, if you compared it to the seniors right now, the seniors is 53, the freshmen is 87 from New Boston. And again, I think it is so hard to predict, and it's unbelievable how kids just show up. You know, it's amazing in the summertime how busy it is. I used to think, like, what is it going to do when they close in the summer? Because they just keep showing up. When I look at these numbers versus these numbers, there's 8 difference in there. And these are all real numbers at one point in time. It just,
Well, I know. I mean, Leslie Dawson once told me she got 19 new kids in the week before school
Yeah.
started. For freshmen. I mean, freshmen.
Yeah.
For kindergartners.
And certainly I understand what, I certainly understand, yeah.
You reduce a teacher. I understand some of the flexibility.
Yeah.
But it just seems like there is a significant bulk of numbers here. And I'm just
Yeah.
trying to figure out, I mean, I get why.
I think it's going to be a longer-term impact at the high school.
Then the high school would go down a teacher.
Except that our teachers' certifications are so specific. So not only are most of our teachers are only certified English teachers, for example. So if you're teaching English, you have to be certified to teach English. In a middle school setting, teachers are more likely to hold a dual certification because of the nature of middle school and how those teams are set up with the two-person teams and how they use staffing. Science teachers at the high school, for example, it's not even just a science certification. You have to be certified in the particular area you're teaching. So our teachers have to be certified to teach physical science or biology or earth and space science or chemistry or physics. So it very quickly becomes very messy as you start to try to look at what those numbers are and how they impact. And I think as we see the Dumbarton piece play out at the high school, we're going to have much better clarity in a year, 2 years, in terms of what true staffing needs are going to continue to be.
Okay. So the other piece to this seems to me, is there an impact in the special education section? Because that is a little bit more of a one-to-one, because, I mean, they pay for special education for their students, so when they pull students out that would require special education, what's the impact of that on special education? Is it going to be less?
For
the school as a whole?
For the high school as a whole?
Yeah.
When we do what we're anticipating next year, for example, for Mountain View, is we've got 5 new para positions at Mountain View that are paid for by New Boston. New Boston's crew going from 6th grade to 7th grade, there's a significant increase in the special education costs. There's a slight decrease, I think, for New Boston's contribution to the special ed at the high school, but there's a big bubble coming up from New Boston that is, for Goffstown's perspective, it's a revenue generator. And to the tune last night, Ray, I think we saw the number was over $200,000 of new special ed costs for next year for 7th grade, just for New Boston.
Okay. But then my question is, they're not needed yet at the high school.
Right.
So are we carrying too much special ed coverage at the high school in anticipation for a special ed need that's in the middle school?
What we do with, watch out, she'll pull the cow. For the special ed, the paraprofessionals just in particular that are kids who have more significant issues or need classroom supports, they move with the kids, or the positions move with the kids. So as a child, either a Goffstown student or a New Boston student goes from 8th grade to 9th grade, that position goes with them. So you'll have either a position move, we sometimes have, a position moves up from the elementary school to Mountain View, but a student might age out at the high school and it kind of goes back into the system. Paraprofessionals in general, we recognize are very costly. All of our schools and all of our teams have a specific process that they use to make a determination with parents, with families, if a child qualifies to need a paraprofessional. And what we know about special ed, folks, is we continue to see an increase in the severity and the need. We continue to see more kids with autism. We continue to see more kids with extensive emotional and behavioral needs. Do I think we're overstaffed in special ed? I don't. Our special ed needs at the high school, our caseloads are pretty big in terms of the number of special ed teachers. And all but just a handful of our special ed teachers at the high school teach classes. So they're teaching small English language arts classes, writing classes, math classes, etc., for kids who need more support.
Okay. So there's no Dunbarton, I'm not trying to violate anybody's privacy over here, but there's no Dunbarton kids leaving who have a paraprofessional. Because if they
Correct.
did, then they would, either the paraprofessional, that particular paraprofessional would move with them, or we would reduce our staff by a paraprofessional.
I think we've had, again, not to get into any confidentiality of anything, there may be a decrease at the middle school level, but that bubble of New Boston kids ate it up.
Okay.
So when we had these 5 positions needed coming up from New Boston Central School, any reductions in Dunbarton, those positions were quickly put together. But again, those positions come in as a revenue. So it's, you see it in your budget, the position exists, but there's also offsetting revenue for it.
Okay. So you're telling me that the overall, because this would also have an impact on guidance, right? Because the number of guidance counselors we have is related, it's a per student, one guidance counselor per X number of students. But you're telling me that the bubble and the Dunbarton departure are counterbalanced by this increase from New Boston, so our overall numbers at the high school are not going to change that much.
Please, my knee hurts.
My take would be it's hard to predict. So right now, the good news is, 89 out of the 94, whatever the number, I mean, the significant bulk of Dunbarton kids are staying, and then we have just seen recently our numbers really have not gone down much, have stayed pretty consistent. When and if they do go down, which they could, depending on if something else happens or some other town we connect with, the high school, I'm ready. I lose sleep at night thinking about, I could be at some point having to reduce staff. That's just a reality. It is. And then reasonable people are going to have incredibly difficult decisions about how best to do that. And Kim alluded to some of the challenges with science, where it would be really hard because it's more specific. So then when you look at, and then people you could say, I'll use for an example and I'll repeat, this is just philosophical. Some might say, like, cut an art position. And typically, if I were to just say Kim and I, we would say, we don't like to do that because that will directly affect kids. They'll feel it. If we were to cut, which we did a few years ago, a social studies position, kids won't feel it as much. They'll have a few extra kids in their class. Teachers will feel it. And over time, if we keep doing it, the question is what will happen to the quality or the performance. So those will be the kind of like tough decisions. Business, there's 2 teachers. What do you do with so I might look at different areas. And again, I'm repeating, I'm not saying we're cutting business, but I'm saying if we get to the point with the tough economic times we're all in, and if numbers do go down and revenue does not come up, and I don't think you can cut any more from elementary schools than others because they're pretty cut, and there's only, there's one teacher with 2 or 3 or 24 kids. So we're prepared that, though I still hope that day does not come because I think it's working. And then I'll make my last pitch. I do go back to, I think if we look at comparative numbers to other schools, I think we're doing a ton with what we're given. And if we compare cost per pupil, we were down. Doesn't mean that people in Goffstown aren't given a ton because of the tax situation.
I have one question, and I'm kind of going along with what Liz is, and that is, now, I've done this for quite a few years, and I've been in the position where the schools come in and said, we've got 45 more students, we need a new teacher.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to eliminate students, but we don't need to eliminate a teacher. And it kind of puts a question is, well, if you add, you need a teacher,
correct.
But if you take away, you don't need to lose
it. Clearly, it's a reality. If we lose 80 kids and nothing changes, do I think we are going to have to make difficult decisions? Yes. I would not. I mean, when I don't know, 80% of the budget is personnel, I mean, clearly, that's just a reality. And my hope is that we don't get there. I hope that something shifts or changes, but I'm also a realist and
And over the last few years, we have reduced staff. We have reduced staff at the high school.
Okay.
Anybody got any questions? Normally, we've gone through the budget line by line. If nobody's, well, we can do that on a review type thing, but I don't, the presentation looks pretty good, so.
I mentioned to Lisa as well, and I don't know if you can do it or if is that, and Kim's number would probably be better, that you could phone a friend, so when you're going through it, and if you need to, or I could come, I guess, but I would also be willing to I would be willing to have my handy-dandy new iPhone, and get right back to you.
You know how to use that?
I'm learning. My kids are teaching me, so.
Is there anything else you'd like? Would we need to speak with Jerry and see what he's got in the high school? Jerry?
I certainly can come up and...
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
I got to play musical chairs. Hi, good evening. Jerry Agate, Director of Facilities. Brian and I and all of the principals spent an enormous amount of time going through the budget. I think Brian alluded to the fact that we tried to concentrate on safety. I can go over the high school. I think it's also important when I go through this to also mention the things that we are deferring. So if you just want to do the high school at this point? Okay. So I kind of did an outline. I wasn't prepared today. I haven't made copies to go around. There really are three, one large item and two smaller items that we are leaving in the budget in hopes that it will go through. And that is, you've heard us talk about, I hate the term, but the Columbine locks. So I have an estimate of about $24,000 to do high school classrooms. The high school would be the biggest piece of all the other schools, naturally. I also put in, because of the water issues that we've had, the first point of mitigation is always having a company come in and they bring in dehumidifiers. I don't have any. And I think it's important, not just, really just the district should own an industrial dehumidifier. There are other issues we've had in the past, especially when we had carpeting. Mountain View, we had issues. So there is a plan to purchase two, and that's about $4,000, about $2,000 per. Another thing.
Lines, those are wrong,
Yes, 432 would be.
We'll get you a page number.
It's 2620. It's the 432 line, the repair line.
309 of your budget, so everybody wants to. If I'm right.
So the locks would be tagged to the repair line in the high school, 2620, 432. The dehumidifiers would be in a equipment line, which would be 2620, 731.
731?
Yes.
Page 311.
Yep.
And then there is a request for, and this, in a sense, is a savings as far as the work that it will accomplish, and that is a machine that can strip the floors without using caustic chemicals. Actually, you just put water and a mild detergent. So those are the three items that would be new, that you have not seen before. I want to mention there are CIP items that we did defer, and I just want to mention some of those so you know, just so you have an idea of what it is that we are moving, because I'm hoping that maybe next year I can propose some of these. Some of the bigger projects included, and you may have heard this in previous presentations, but we've replaced the lockers in the 400 wing, and we have in CIP to replace the lockers at the high school in the 300 wing. That would complete the locker change out. There was also in the budget a few years ago to do some electrostatic painting of the 100 wing lockers. I'm just trying to, I had to print over this. It was, we have some abatement. I shouldn't say it that way. We still have some floors. We have, so you know, we do a 3-year by law inspection of any asbestos or 9x9 tiles, if you're aware of that. They're in pretty good shape. But every 3 years we do get a report and they make recommendations. So we did, I want to say 4 classrooms. We did an overlay this year. Was trying to set up a progressive system to complete the high school. We didn't have enough money, I guess it was 10 years when we did the renovation, so we only did the ones that were identified in the report. So it is something that you will see in subsequent proposals. It may be 3 or 4 classrooms. And sometimes there are surprises, as you know, as you're lifting tiles or trying to do work, then you're obligated to abate. So it's kind of an unknown, but we'd like to have something in there to realize that potential cost. Those are just some. I don't think we need to go through, but we've been doing so many bathroom petitions a year. What we're trying to do is concentrate on the most important aspects of facilities.
The locks came out of this year's. Did you adjust that to come out of this year's?
We did.
We
That
did.
was reduced for,
Sorry. Hey.
it's all good.
Gary, would you want to speak to Mountain View as well?
Do I have it? I can, yes.
I haven't pulled out, I don't think anybody's pulled out the Mountain View budgets.
That's out. So this is out. Let me know when you've got the Mountain View.
You got any new positions at the high school?
High
positions,
school,
hours?
no. At
Is that in personnel?
Bartlett Elementary School. And I'm not sure, we did put in here, I don't know if that's high school, part-time grounds position?
It's on the district.
Is it district?
Yeah, that was in the district.
Yeah. And the idea there was to, although Parks and Recs does a phenomenal job, with the personnel I have, it's very hard. We've been picking away at trying to reduce the amount of, we're getting a lot of overgrowth. And there are many other things that do happen. We are oftentimes called upon to help line a field, or it helps with snow removal. It would be a 4-hour position, not benefited, and we haven't had an addition in ages. And then in the summertime, the wintertime would be working outside with snow removal and so on. Somebody who can go from building to building. Let's go back to Mountain View.
Can I just one more question?
Oh, yes, of course.
Will that require you to purchase any equipment?
Nothing that would be like we do have a weed whacker. I don't think there'd be anything that I do have chainsaws, and I think without impacting the budget, I think we can manage that position with minimal amount of equipment. We have quite a bit.
Uh-oh, Ray's moving on.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what it means.
So that
either.
Keep myself out of trouble here.
Can I leave?
No, I just thought I might be able to help you with the detail.
Oh, okay.
Here's
I don't
what
have
the budget
that.
is for Mountain View. We're looking at page 236.
All right. So I'm sorry. Did we answer?
Yeah, you said you don't need to buy any equipment. You got everything you need. So next year we weren't going to see chainsaws or
No.
buy a new riding mower or.
Okay, I'm not getting a riding mower. I'm just letting you know. So let's continue on Mountain View, and then you can. I'll go through here, and if there are any changes that I'm not aware of, I'm sure Ray will jump right in.
Just read from this.
Okay, let me see if it matches. Well, that's out. Okay.
The locks are out.
I better go through this just so I can follow.
Do you want to wait to do Mountain View when we do Mountain View next week?
Well, I'll be here.
And that way
It's
you can
entirely
maybe
up to
have
you.
something-
I honestly was not prepared to come up today. I thought I was going next week.
All right, that's fine.
So,
We can wait till next week if you feel more comfortable.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, let's wait till next week and you can get a
Okay.
chance to. Is that okay with you, Ray?
Sure.
All right. We'll wait till next week. I just saw you sitting back there. I figured while we were doing
I
the high
know.
school, you'd want to talk about the high school stuff.
All right. Well, thank you, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you next
All
week.
right.
Sounds like Gary's ready.
Okay. Gary? Yep. Last name, Gary?
Hi, Gary Gerolman, the IT director.
Can you spell it for the
Girollimon.
Gerolman?
Yeah.
You should have known that.
Yeah, it means twist of lemon in Italian. So I don't know what the ancestors did over there, but a little lemonade stand.
So we're talking technology at the high school.
Yes, and I guess district-wide, the technology budget is really, truly bare bones this year. There were a lot of requests from the principals throughout the district for things like replacing computers in certain computer labs, additional smart boards. Just about everything has been cut. We're really, this year's kind of like a treading water year. But I did want to talk about a couple of things that are in the budget that are a little bit different than the ordinary things that you normally see. And, the one thing that Mr. Balke has already mentioned is the security systems in several of the schools. And, I think that's a really important addition, because they're not only used kind of after the fact, forensically, they're a deterrent. We've got the monitors right up in the main office at the high school. The students know that how many cameras we have there. We're going to fill in. What we want to do is fill in some of the gaps where we don't see things there. And same thing in the other buildings. The other thing that was mentioned, I think, by Ray when he was talking about the district budget was $10,000 for a new library system. I just wanted to tell you why that's necessary. That's actually something that we have every year for the past few years. We've put it in the budget and it's been cut. And it's really getting to the point where it's not just thin ice anymore. The ice is cracking. And we are currently running a software package called InfoCenter. And InfoCenter was a Sagebrush product. And Sagebrush was bought by Follett, and they dropped InfoCenter. So the product's not even available or maintained anymore, and they have been putting pressure on us for the last several years to upgrade to their product, which is called Destiny. And not only is the software product discontinued, the server that it's running on, it's a 7-year-old server, so we're really kind of like shaky there. The other big thing in both the high school budget and the Mountain View budget is an improvement to our network backbone. I'd just like to kind of describe what that's all about. The current network infrastructure that's in both buildings was installed about 10 years ago, around 2004. And the backbone that stretches throughout the building, that all the computers and all of the printers and all of the now we have wireless access points for the wireless laptops and iPads, and our phone systems on the computer network now, and our security systems on the computer network now. When this was first put in 10 years ago, we thought it was, and it was at the time, a really, fast, and it's a gigabit backbone. Now all of these devices that are connecting up to it are gigabit devices. So what we have is we've got a gigabit backbone, and in the high school alone, over 1,000 gigabit devices connected up into this backbone. And you can imagine if you were, you're driving down your street and you're trying to get on the highway, and the highway is the same number of lanes as the streets, and you've got 1,000 streets going into the highway. And that's kind of like exactly what's going on in both of the buildings. What we want to do is we want to take the main highway that stretches throughout the building and increase it to 10 lanes. And that's going to give us the breathing room that we need. So that's what that particular budget line is in both of those budgets.
Gary, you can give them a page number. It's right there.
Oh, yeah. It's on the high school, it's on page 215.
No,
and, has it changed?
257 for the high school.
257 and 193 for the middle school. Right. Yeah. I guess it was from an old copy.
And Gary, to review the cost of that.
Yeah, and the middle school, it's $22,312, and in the high school, it's $32,000 and
So it's
Yeah.
pure ProCurve,
Yes.
MDF, and IDF upgrades.
Yes. The difference in price between the two buildings is the high school has more network closets than the middle school does. So you need the devices in the central office location, and server office location, and all of the, the switch closets that we have in the building.
And this also includes the library upgrade.
The library
And that
upgrade was,
$32,000?
no, the library upgrade was in the district budget, and that's $10,000.
Gary's going to reuse the current gigabyte.
Oh, I should mention that the equipment that we'd be taking out of the high school and the middle school, we want to repurpose it in the elementary schools. So it's going to be a really nice upgrade for those locations where they really don't even have a backbone. They just have all interconnected switches that are, and once you daisy chain them, several times, I mean, if you're on the bottom of the switch, you've got, really bad
I know
connectivity.
what you're talking about,
Yeah.
daisy chain.
Yeah. But we are, yeah.
I'm going to ask Frank to explain that one.
Yeah, it's
Slow.
Yeah. It's kind of like what we do with a lot of our computers. It's kind of like trickle down. We trickle things down to the elementary schools from the high school and the middle school. And we're going to do the same thing with the network hardware.
Any questions? That's too easy, huh?
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Anybody got any questions or anything? Anything else you need to bring? Diane, you have anything else for tonight?
No.
Is there anything you want to point out that, Diane, that you may want to, did everybody hit the topics that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I think so.
Good. All right. Let's see any other questions. Anybody got anything? Lee, you made a motion?
I seconded it.
Motion by Lee to adjourn, seconded by Brian.